Hello, let's chat for a bit about Kompis by Mathias Nard. This is the most recent book that I finished. I am not in my usual place. I'm actually visiting my sister in Arkansas, and this room where I am filming has recessed lighting in the ceiling, so I looked for a place where it wasn't shining off on my head, and it doesn't look like I succeeded with that. But I did want to get a quick chat in on Kompis. This book was originally published in 2015 in French, and then this translation, translated by Charlotte Mandell, was published in 2017. And this book has won and been nominated for several prestigious prizes, including the Prix Goncourt. Apologies to French-speaking people. I know I'm terribly mispronouncing that, but a literary prize in France, as a big literary prize in France, and this was also nominated and hit the shortlist for the Man Booker International Prize, and it's also been nominated for the Republic of Consciousness Book Prize, among other prizes in Europe. I think in Italy and in Germany, it's won some prizes and been nominated for some others. So. Comes, really fairly critically acclaimed. I wanted to read it because I read a book by Mathias Nard called Zone last year and really enjoyed it. And so since he's a contemporary writer, I decided last year, I would really try to keep up with what he's writing. And then this book sort of fit in with one of my priority reading themes, which was music and art, because the main character in this novel is a musicologist named Franz Ritter. And so, a musicologist, and I gathered it involved a lot of music from Orientalist music from the Near East, and so I was real curious to dive into this book and see what it was all about. And so I'm really glad I did. As I mentioned, it's concerning a musicologist whose name is Franz Ritter, and we join him in this night. He's going to bed, and he ends up spending this restless night of insomnia, and then we go along with him on this journey of insomnia in his mind as he reflects on his memories of the past, as well as some sort of restless dreams that he has, but reflects on his past, specifically around scholarship, and his travels to the Near East, like Istanbul, Aleppo, Damascus, Tehran. He was in Tehran during the Islamic Revolution in the late 1970s, this character, so that was really interesting. He lives in Vienna, and then as this night wears on, he journeys, reflects on his past as well as his present. He has an illness of some kind. We gather it's a chronic illness. I gathered it was some sort of neurodegenerative illness. It's never really quite specified, so he reflects on that in his present, as well as in his past and present, his sort of unrequited love for a fellow scholar named Sarah. And so as the night wears on, the chapters are actually divided into time. So as the night progresses, the chapters, I don't have the actual chapters called up, but it may be something like 11:56 or 2:05 a.m. As the night progresses, the chapters are as the night is progressing through time. And the book is really just this jumble of memories that covers this vast experience, sort of how a person thinks. When you can't get to sleep and your mind is thinking about. Sometimes he thinks about his present, like maybe articles he might write, articles he has written in the past, embarrassments that he suffered in the past. He eventually reads through some emails and things like that. Talks about just this wide array of artists, musicians, composers, literary figures, historical epics. It's just really pretty sweeping. It all comes together, though, in quite a tight little story. It's not a story that's real easy to read, but that's not because the language is difficult or anything like that. It's because of all the references. So what really took me a while to read, what took me so long, I think, to read through this book was that I was constantly checking the references and also checking Spotify and listening to different works that are mentioned that I had never heard of. And one kind of thing that I came out of this book with was that there is this vast amount of knowledge. Every once in a while you read one of these books that you realize, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. I have barely scratched the surface of books and authors and eras and history, and so that was really quite a learning experience. Operas I had never heard of, music I had never heard of, so I really wound up with a lot of additional compositions on my playlist on Spotify, as well as things added to my reading list. Just a wealth of information there, but it really reads like the story of someone's life. It's really like a reminiscence, I guess, of someone's life as he as he spends this sort of restless night contemplating his past, his present, and then those things that he's bringing over from his past into his present. And so it was a wonderful experience as far as that went. Some other thoughts I had about it was this idea. To me, it was sort of a meditation of otherness. One word that gets brought up very frequently in this novel is alterity, which is another way of saying, otherness. And he uses this word a lot in reference to lots of different things. Really about this Orientalism. He spends, because this is the focus of his scholarly research, is the Orientalism. He lives in Vienna, so he studies European music, but how it's been influenced by Orientalists, which are Europeans who go to the Near East and study that culture and then sort of bring that culture into and incorporate that culture into European culture. And so this has had, over the course of, the centuries, this has had some very fruitful sort of aspects to it, but it's also had, of course, the aspect of colonialism and this sort of thing. But the otherness, the East of the East, he actually quotes quite extensively in this book Fernando Pessoa, who's one of my favorite poets, who I've talked about quite frequently on my channel. And Fernando Pessoa, in one of his poems, says something about the East that is east of the East. And, it's sort of this always finding the other, because, opposites attract, right? And so the West and East is sort of this other relationship, this alterity, as well as his relationship with Sarah, with a lover, and the different lovers throughout in literature that he brings up, lovers throughout novels and history and through the Near East mainly. So that was just that was real cool how that concept of otherness just kept popping up, and it made me think about this a lot. So that was kind of great. I mentioned that it really wasn't really that quick of a read. I think this book is one of those books that, you would really need to slow down and let yourself just sort of absorb, because it sounds like it might be a jumble and hard and difficult to work your way through, I think, due to the fact that he does jump from subject to subject and from topic to topic, and then sometimes he's in a dream state and sometimes he's in a memory state. But it's really I found it pretty easy to tell that, but it's such a reflective book that it really caused me to slow down and reflect on what was being said. And one thing about the character Franz Ritter, his character, this author, Mathias Nard's character in Zone, was not a very likable person, since he had worked for the Secret Service of France and had been involved in some very violent things in the Eastern Mediterranean region. But this character, Franz Ritter, was so sympathetic because, as he's remembering these things, how you do when you're sort of thinking to yourself, you don't usually hide. Well, you do hide things from yourself to some degree, but, you do let yourself remember embarrassing situations and things like this. And so his awkwardness with Sarah and his timidity and his shyness and things really comes through. And so I really felt a great sympathy for the character. And then this illness that he has that we don't know, that gets brought up, periodically. It's just such a, I found it just really such a kind of moving story as it progresses on through the night up until, the morning. And as he goes through different, he listens to the radio at one point, makes some herbal tea, browses his bookshelves, skims things, looks at email, sort of the things I think that we all do when we're restless and, got something on our mind. And, I think that his illness is weighing on his mind, as well as he is in communication with this Sarah that he's known for years. She is currently in I've forgotten. Seems like it's Indonesia or somewhere like that. Anyway, the Far East. And so she's away from him, but he sort of lingers. He writes her way more than she writes him, and he sort of waits for her responses and lingers on the responses from her in the past and stuff. So it's just a real cool kind of the way that it's kind of written. I really enjoyed it. So I will continue to follow Mathias Nard, I think, and try to pick up the stuff that he reads. This was published in 2015. It took a couple of years to get into English, but I don't think enough good literature from the world winds up in translation. And this, I'm glad to see that Charlotte Mandell, who translated Zone, they seems to be translating his works, and I hope she keeps that up, because I don't know how I can't really judge it from the original French, but it's just a beautiful work to read in English as well. So I think I'll stop the chat with that. I did want to touch base on what I'm currently reading. I actually just started this because I wound up being a little delayed in finishing Kompis. I had some film noir that I wanted to watch, so I've actually devoted some time over the last couple of weeks to watching some film noir movies that I had wanted to get to. So, but nevertheless, I'm glad I got Kompis finished, but my next read is going to be the Mussorgsky Riddle by Darin Kennedy. This is a paranormal fantasy, and it fell into my priority reading list, again, due to the music and art theme, because this is the story of a young boy who stops speaking, and the doctors can't figure out why, so his mother enlists the aid of a psychic who determines that the young boy's mind has been fragmented into the different movements of the Pictures of an Exhibition suite by Mathias Mussorgsky. So it's got a classical music tie-in, so I thought that would be kind of cool to read a paranormal fantasy that had this classical music tie-in. So I'm going to get started on this very soon. I've only just started chapter 1, so I don't have much to say about that yet. And then for my next read, I haven't really decided. I've been letting the randomness of the universe choose my reading, by doing a drawing, but since I don't have my little pieces of paper or my books, so I'm just going to choose. It's either going to be one of these two books to read after the Mussorgsky Riddle. Is either going to be The Dark Forest, which is the third book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu. This is a Chinese science fiction writer. I've read the previous two works in this trilogy, and I really wanted to get the third one read in 2017 and didn't. So this may end up being my first interruption read of 2017, because this will be off of my priority reading list. But I might also by this time get started on Definitely Maybe by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. This is Soviet-era science fiction. This takes place, I think it was published originally in the 1970s in Russian. And this is scientists are finding that their work is interrupted somehow, and there may be some sort of nefarious force at work that's preventing, scientific progress. I'm planning on doing a buddy read with Richardson Reads with this book, so I'm not sure if he's ready to start this yet. If he's not ready to start this, then I will be reading Death's End next, which will be my first interruption read. If he is ready to start this, then I will start, probably read Definitely Maybe next. I'm not real sure. So just stay tuned. I will have more to come. Until then, take care. Bye.